Yes, my dear students, welcome to today's online class. Today we are going to discuss following topics. Listen here, in the previous class we taken the structure of classification of memory devices, and we studied totally regarding primary memory devices, right? Memory devices are mainly classified into two types: primary memory devices and secondary memory devices. So in the previous class we discussed in detail primary memory devices, right? So there we discussed about RAM and ROM. Before going to start secondary memory devices, let us see the differences between RAM and ROM. This is very important for the exam point of view. You may get 2-mark questions or 3-mark questions on this. Differentiate between RAM and ROM. See here, it is a simple. What are the difference between RAM and ROM? So last class we discussed RAM and ROM are called the primary memory devices. RAM stands for random access memory, ROM stands for read-only memory. And what we discussed, what is going to be stored in RAM? RAM contains intermediate results as well as the final results of the program. Whereas what ROM is going to hold? ROM is going to hold BIOS instructions, that is basic input output instructions to run which are helpful to run the system, right? So in this way we discussed regarding RAM and ROM, right? So now let us list some differences between RAM and ROM. What is the first difference? Just you write the stands for of both, that is first point. RAM stands for random access memory, whereas ROM stands for read only memory, right? RAM stands for random access memory, ROM stands for read only memory. And the next point we can write what? RAM allows the computer to read data quickly to run applications. It allows reading and writing. Means RAM contains intermediate results and final results. It means it allows instructions which are needed to execute the program, and we can read as well as write into the RAM. Means here read write is allowed. Read write is allowed, right? Whereas in ROM only we can read. Only we can read. Suppose we want to write anything in ROM means it is not possible. It is a pre-built memory, or else we can say ROM memory is programmed by the manufacturer. ROM is a manufacturer memory, like that we studied, right? So that's why that is only reading is possible in ROM, where in RAM you can write or we can read is allowed in RAM. Okay. And the third point, what we can write? RAM is volatile. RAM is volatile, whereas it is a ROM is non-volatile memory, right? RAM is a volatile memory, ROM is a non-volatile memory. It means whenever the power goes off, automatically the content of RAM is erased, and that's why this is called volatile memory. Whereas ROM contents will be there in it even though power goes off or power failure, then also ROM content will be as it is. That's why this is called non-volatile memory. And the next fourth point, what we can differentiate means there are two types of RAM. There are two types of RAM. That is, what are the types? SRAM and DRAM. SRAM and DRAM, that is static random access memory, dynamic random access memory. Whereas in ROM, three types of ROM, right? Three types of ROM we can observe. What are those? First one, PROM. Second one, EPROM. Third one, EEPROM. Right? What is the fourth difference? In RAM, we have only two types, or else RAM memory is again classified into two types, or else we can say examples for RAM, SRAM and DRAM. That is static random access memory, dynamic random access memory. Whereas in ROM, we can observe three types: PROM, EPROM, EEPROM. That is programmable read-only memory, erasable programmable read-only memory, electrically erasable programmable read-only memory, right? So these 4 points gives differences between RAM and ROM, right? These 4 points represents differences between RAM and ROM. And one more thing I said in the previous class, right? So in this chapter you may get 1 mark questions like expand. He may be asked EEPROM or DROM, SRAM, ROM, RAM. He can ask anything. You can get 1 mark question from this chapter like this: expand it. He is going to give PROM. Then what we have to write? Programmable read only memory, right? Like this we can expect from this chapter. And difference between RAM and ROM is over, right? Now let us see secondary memory. devices. Now let us see secondary memory devices. Before going to start this secondary memory devices, let us just recall primary memory devices. What is the mean by primary memory devices? Means devices. Of course, secondary memory devices or primary memory devices are devices which are going to hold data as well as instructions, no doubt. But the main difference is primary memory devices have less storage capacity to store data. Suppose our aim is to store huge amount of data, means we have to prefer. So what I am telling here, what is the primary memory devices? Means suppose storage capacity is very less, means generally we can say those things are primary memory devices. Suppose our aim is to store huge amount of data, or we are going to use memory to store huge amount of data, means generally they are called secondary memory devices. And we can say primary memory is a temporary memory, whereas a secondary memory is a permanent memory. Means what the content is there in primary, that is not going to be there permanently. We discussed in RAM, right? Whenever we are going to study in detail primary memory, we have RAM and ROM. RAM is a temporary memory, ROM is a permanent memory. Okay, no problem. But in general, suppose you consider any secondary devices, they are all having a permanent memory. Means they are having to store permanently data. That's why secondary memory is called permanent storage memory. Whereas in primary, suppose anything data is there in RAM, means when power goes off, automatically the data will be erased. That's why that RAM is also called volatile memory. This is the reason that we can say primary memory is a temporary memory. Whereas you take or consider any secondary memory devices, they are going to hold data permanently in it. So what we can say, primary memory means primary memory devices means these are the devices which are going to hold data temporarily. Whereas secondary means it is these are secondary memory devices are devices which are going to hold data permanently. Now let us see in detail about secondary memory devices. What he says, the storage capacity of a primary memory is not very large. It cannot hold a large amount of data, including programs which may be needed for processing. The secondary storage devices are necessary. What he says means, suppose our aim is to store large amount of data, means it is not possible in primary. Even in primary memory, we cannot store programs also. Only program related inputs or calculation formulas are coming into the primary memory for the execution purpose, and that will be there until power is on. If power is off, means that thing is also be erased. That's why to store data permanently, we have to think about another memory, that is called secondary memory. So that's why he says that the storage capacity of a primary memory is very large. It cannot hold a large amount of data, including programs which may be needed for processing. The secondary storage devices are necessary. And we can also say the secondary memory is used for bulk storage or mass storage of programs, data and other informations. Secondary memory has much larger capacity than main memory compared to primary memory or main memory, we can say that we can store large amount of information in secondary memory, and the secondary memory retains the information once stored in it permanently. The magnetic memory such as hard disk, compact disk, pen drive, memory cards, these are the most commonly used secondary memory devices in the computer. What he says? What are secondary memory devices? The magnetic memories such as hard disk, compact hard disk, floppy disk, compact disk, pen drive, memory cards, these are the commonly used secondary memory devices, right? So he says that's why we need secondary memory. And next thing we can say that this secondary memory devices are classified into two types. First one is magnetic memory devices, magnetic memory devices, and the second one is optical memory devices, optical memory devices. Now let us discuss one by one. Secondary memory devices are again classified into magnetic memory devices and optical memory devices. Now let us see what is mean by magnetic memory devices. Magnetic memory devices are thin circular plastic plates on which some magnetic material is coated. He says magnetic memory devices are thin circular plates on which some magnetic material is coated, that is coated by magnetic coat mark, and magnetic discs come in various sizes and materials. This magnetic discs, magnetic memory devices are comes in various size and materials. They use the properties of magnetism to store data on a magnetic surface. Means magnetic memory devices are going to use the properties of magnetism to store the data on magnetic surface. In a disk plate, in a magnetic disk plate, information is stored on both surface. The surface is further divided into number of invisible concentric circles are called tracks. What he says? This magnetic devices are in a disk plate. Information is stored on both surface. The surface is further divided into number of invisible concentric circles called tracks. Means these magnetic devices are circular, in a circular manner, right, in a thin circular manner, and he says that the information is stored in both sides of the circular magnetic plate. The surface is further divided into number of invisible concentric circles called tracks. Means these magnetic devices are in the form of circle, in the form of number of circles, right, number of circles, and the surface is further divided into number of invisible concentric circles are called tracks. So this each circle is considered as tracks. right? Each circle is considered as tracks, and the tracks are further divided into various sections called sectors. Just you can consider any one circle. Suppose I am considering this circle here, and each circle is divided into number of parts like this. Number of parts, each circle is divided into number of parts. This is one part, this is another part, this is another part. Like this, each circle is divided into number of parts, and this each part like this. So this each part we can call as sectors. Each part on a circle is considered as sectors, right? The tracks are further divided into various sections called as sectors. And next point regarding magnetic memory is, to store information, it is necessary for us to identify the track and the sector where it has to be stored, right? So this number of tracks and number of sectors are there. So it is necessary to store any information. It is necessary to identify particular track, particular sector is needed. And he says that the stored information can be read any number of times without affecting the stored data. So he says that the whatever information we are going to store in magnetic memory devices can be stored, in magnetic memory devices. It is possible to store a number of informations, and whenever we need, we can access that information number of times. It is possible. And he says that this magnetic memory devices are again classified into two types. Not two types. This magnetic device means hard disk and floppy disk. These are the examples for magnetic memory devices. What are the examples? Hard disk, first one. Floppy disk, right? Floppy disk. He says that hard disk and floppy disk are the examples for what he says, hard disk and floppy disk. These are the devices, or these are the examples for magnetic memory devices. Means these are made up of magnetic materials. What are the examples for magnetic devices? Means magnetic secondary memory devices means hard disk and floppy disk.